It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about going quiet. It's never a decision you make consciously. You don't wake up one morning and think, okay, I'm done sharing. I'm done opening up. I'm done letting people in on what's actually going on with me. It doesn't work like that. It happens in layers, slowly, over a long stretch of time that you can't pinpoint the beginning of. One conversation at a time, one moment at a time, one small disappointment after another that you absorb without saying anything and file away somewhere deep. And eventually, the filing cabinet gets so full that you just stop trying to add to it. And one day, you realize you're not telling anyone anything real anymore. And the strange part is, you almost didn't notice. Because on the outside, nothing looks different. You still show up, you still talk, you still ask people how they're doing and listen to the answer and laugh at the right moments and say the right things. You're present, you're engaged, you're fine. But there's a version of you that nobody is seeing. A whole interior life that you've stopped trying to translate into words because somewhere along the way you learned that the translation never quite worked, that what you said never landed the way you meant it, that the version of you that came out in conversation was always a slightly worse version of the one you were trying to share. So you stopped trying to share it. Think about the last time you really told someone something. Not surface stuff, not the updates you give when someone asks how you're doing, not the version of your life you perform when you need to seem okay, but the real thing, the actual thought you've been carrying, the fear you haven't said out loud, the thing that's been sitting in your chest for weeks that you haven't found the right moment to put into words because you're not even sure you have the right words for it. When was the last time you tried to say that to someone? And when you did, what happened? Maybe they changed the subject, not on purpose, not cruelly, just the way conversations drift when the thing being said is heavier than the other person was prepared for. One moment you were in it, actually in it, saying something real, and then somehow the conversation moved and the moment closed, and you were left holding the thing you'd tried to put down. Maybe they gave you advice when you needed them to just sit with you, when all you wanted was for someone to say, "I hear you. That sounds hard. I'm here." Instead, they went into fix-it mode, and you had to spend the rest of the conversation managing their attempt to solve something you weren't asking them to solve. Maybe they made it about themselves. Not out of selfishness exactly, just the way people do. You started talking and something you said reminded them of something they went through, and suddenly you were listening to their story. And your thing, the thing you'd finally worked up the courage to say, was just sitting there on the table between you, untouched. Or maybe the worst one. Maybe they were fine. Maybe they listened. Maybe they said the right things. But you could feel it, the slight discomfort underneath their response, the way they weren't fully with you, the way part of them was already thinking about what to say next rather than actually being in the moment of what you were saying. And you felt the gap between what you were trying to share and what they were actually receiving. And you filed it away, and you said you were fine, and you didn't try again for a while. There is also the version where you did get it right, where someone listened and said exactly the thing, and you felt it, that exhale, that release, the specific warmth of being accurately received. And then life moved on, as it does, and somehow you never quite got back to that level of honesty with that person again. Not because anything went wrong, just because the moment passed, because the next conversation was lighter, because you both tacitly agreed to return to the surface after that one deep dive. And the deep dive never happened again. And gradually, that person became someone you saw regularly and spoke to warmly and felt nothing like as close to as you did in that one unplanned moment years ago. And you wonder sometimes whether you imagined it, whether that closeness was real, or whether it was just what happens when two people have an honest conversation and mistake the relief for intimacy. But it wasn't a mistake. The relief was real. The closeness was real. The experience of being known, even briefly, even partially, was real. And then it closed. And now you're here. There's a specific kind of loneliness that lives in being surrounded by people who don't fully know you. It's different from being alone. Being alone is simple. It's just the absence of people. You can feel it and name it and eventually fill it. But this other kind, the kind where there are people everywhere, people who care about you, people who would say they know you well, people who think they have a clear picture of who you are and what your life is, this kind is harder to name, because from the outside, it looks like the opposite of loneliness. You have people, you have relationships, you have a life that is populated with other humans who choose to be in it. And still, you feel like you're in a room behind glass, present but not quite reachable, there but not fully known, going through the motions of connection without the actual experience of it, because the actual experience requires something you've slowly stopped doing, telling people things. You can be deeply, completely lonely inside a full life, and that's the kind nobody talks about, because it doesn't fit the picture. You don't look lonely. You're not isolated. You're not sitting alone in a dark room with no one to call. You're at the table. You're in the group chat. You're making plans and keeping them, and laughing and living. And from every observable external position, you are fine. But fine and known are not the same thing. And you've been fine for a long time now, without being known. The relationships where this shows up the most are often the closest ones. Not the acquaintances, not the colleagues, the people who are supposed to know you, the ones who have been in your life long enough that they think they have a complete picture. Parents, siblings, a partner, a best friend from years back who you still talk to, but somehow never talk to. Those relationships carry their own particular weight because there's history in them, years of accumulated knowing that is also, paradoxically, years of accumulated assumptions. People who've known you for a long time tend to think they know you better than they do. They've built a model of you, who you are, how you handle things, what you're like, and they update it less and less often as time goes on. The model becomes fixed, and then your actual self has to either fit inside it or exist somewhere the model doesn't reach. And slowly, the real you migrates to the place the model doesn't reach. You've had the experience of saying something real to someone who's known you for years and watching them look slightly confused, like what you said didn't match their file on you, like you'd colored outside the lines they'd drawn around who you were supposed to be, and you'd backtracked, made a joke of it, softened it into something that fit the model better, and they'd relaxed, and the conversation moved on, and the real thing went back inside. Because being known accurately sometimes requires being willing to revise the picture someone else has of you, and that revision is uncomfortable for them, and you've learned to protect them from that discomfort at the cost of never quite getting to be seen as you actually are. Here's where it started for most people. Somewhere early, before you had the words to understand what was happening. You told someone something that mattered to you, and it didn't land. Maybe you were a kid. Maybe you were a teenager. Maybe you were just someone who hadn't learned yet that not everyone has the capacity to hold what you're trying to share. You said the thing, you put the real thing out there, and the response was wrong. Not mean, not cruel, just wrong, off. Like the person you were talking to was on a different frequency and your signal got distorted somewhere in the transmission. And you felt something that you couldn't name at the time, but that stayed with you. The understanding that saying the real thing is a risk, and sometimes the risk doesn't pay off. So you started learning, the way you always learn these things, through experience, through small repeated lessons that accumulate into a rule you follow without ever consciously deciding to follow it. You learned who was safe to tell things to. You learned which topics made people uncomfortable and which ones they could handle. You learned how to read a room before you said something real. You learned to test the water before you went in, to say something small and see how it was received before you said the bigger thing underneath it. And gradually, the testing became the whole interaction. The small, safe things became the entire conversation. And the bigger thing underneath, the real thing, stayed there, inside, unexpressed, adding itself to the collection of things you'd decided weren't worth trying to share.
You got good at it. At the performance of openness that isn't actually openness. At seeming like someone who is present and engaged and connected while keeping the actual interior of your life completely to yourself. At talking without saying anything. At answering questions without answering them. It became so natural that sometimes you forget you're doing it. There's a specific moment when children learn this. Not in one lesson, but in a series of small ones. The first time you came home upset about something and a parent was distracted. The first time you cried in front of someone and felt worse for doing it. The first time you told a friend something embarrassing and it got repeated. The first time you let someone see you struggling and what came back wasn't care, it was discomfort or advice or dismissal or the particular cruelty of having your vulnerability turned into a story someone else told about you. You were young and you didn't have the framework to understand what had happened. What you understood was simpler, that showing the inside was not always safe. And so you began the process of deciding, piece by piece, what was shareable and what wasn't, what could go outside and what had to stay in. And you got very good at this sorting. So good that now you do it automatically, without noticing, in real time, in the middle of conversations, editing yourself as you speak. That editing was a gift once. It kept you safe in environments where safety was not guaranteed. But you are not in those environments anymore, and the editing stayed. Long after the original reason for it was gone, long after the people and situations that made it necessary had moved on and been replaced by people who might actually be able to hold what you're carrying. The editing stayed, because learned behaviors don't disappear just because the circumstances change. They stay until you actively do something about them, and you haven't done something about them yet. The money part of this is real. Nobody talks about their finances. Not really. Not the actual numbers. Not the actual fear. Not the specific particular shame of a specific particular financial situation that you live inside every day, but would never describe accurately to another person, because describing it accurately means saying things out loud that you've only ever thought alone in the dark. You've talked around it, said things like, "Things are tight right now," or "I'm just trying to get sorted," or "You know how it is." Vague enough to communicate that something is happening, without being specific enough to actually let anyone see it, because seeing it means they might have opinions about it, advice you didn't ask for, judgments you can't unhear, a look in their eye that you'll spend the rest of the conversation trying to read. So you keep it vague, and you carry the specific version completely alone. There is an enormous weight to carrying your financial life by yourself. Not just the stress of the numbers, but the isolation of the stress. The experience of lying awake doing math that nobody knows you're doing, of making decisions under pressure that nobody knows you're under, of getting through a month that was genuinely hard in ways that nobody around you has any idea about, and then showing up the next week as if nothing happened. You've done this more times than you can count, and nobody knows. And sometimes someone will say something casual about money, a comment about prices or spending or something they bought or something they're saving for, and you'll hear it and something in you will bristle because you're living inside a financial reality that is so much more complicated and heavy than the thing they're casually referencing. And you can't say that, so you just nod and absorb it and add it to the growing internal collection of things you're carrying alone. The collection is heavy. You've gotten good at not showing it. Money carries a specific kind of shame that other topics don't, not because money is inherently shameful, but because we are taught in 1,000 subtle ways that what you have is what you're worth, that your financial situation is evidence of your intelligence, your discipline, your values, the quality of your choices. So the number in your bank account is not just a number, it is a verdict, and nobody wants their verdict read out loud. You've watched other people talk casually about their money and felt a particular mixture of envy and disbelief. Envy at how easy it seemed for them, disbelief that they could just say it like that, so openly, as if the number were neutral information rather than a reflection of everything. And you wondered whether they really were that comfortable, or whether they just had numbers that made it easier to be comfortable, whether the openness was confidence or just the particular freedom that comes from not being ashamed of what you have. And then you wondered whether your number were different, you would find it easier to say. And then you stopped wondering and went back to not saying anything.
But here's what the silence is actually doing. It's not just keeping people from knowing your financial situation, it's keeping you from being able to ask for help when you need it. From being able to say, I'm really struggling right now and I need someone to think through this with me. From having access to information and perspective that might actually make the situation better, because you can't get help you haven't asked for, and you can't ask for help you've been unable to name. The silence around money is not neutral. It has a cost, and that cost compounds, the same way debt compounds, invisibly, over time, until one day you look at the total and feel the full weight of it all at once. Think about the last time someone asked how you were doing, and you told them the truth. Not the whole truth, necessarily, not an inventory of everything that's hard right now, just something real, something that wasn't fine or good or busy, something that actually described a piece of your actual experience. When was that? For a lot of people, the honest answer is they can't remember. Not because nothing has been happening, things have been happening. A lot of things maybe. Things that have taken up significant interior real estate, things that have required quiet management and careful carrying, but none of it made it out into an actual conversation with an actual person who actually knows about it. Because you've learned to absorb things privately. Because somewhere along the way, sharing stopped feeling like relief and started feeling like risk. And that shift is worth looking at, because it wasn't always like that. There was a version of you that was more open, more willing to say the thing, more inclined to reach out when something was heavy and try to put it into words and trust that another person could hold it with you. What happened to that version? The honest answer is that version got hurt. Not catastrophically, not in one big moment that broke everything, but in the slow, accumulating way of small letdowns, of moments that didn't land, of conversations that drifted, of people who couldn't quite meet you where you were and who didn't seem to know they'd missed you, of reaching out and finding the hand you reached for wasn't quite where you thought it would be. And that version learned, and the learning looked like protection, but it cost something important. The relationships you have right now are not what they could be, not because the people in them are inadequate, not because you chose wrong or ended up with the wrong people around you, but because you've been withholding yourself from them. Not intentionally, not with malice, just in the slow, gradual way that happens when you've learned that the real version isn't safe to share. You offer them the composed version, the capable version, the one who is handling it, and they receive that version and respond to it, and the relationship builds on that foundation. And so what you have is real, but it's not complete. It's a house built on a blueprint that's missing a floor. You have friends you've known for years who don't know what's actually going on with your finances. A partner, maybe, who senses something but doesn't know what because you've been too expert at performing fine. A family member who checks in regularly and who gets a thoroughly curated update every time, never the actual thing. And these people love you, and they would want to know, and you haven't let them. Because letting them would require trust, and trust requires risk, and risk means you might say the thing and it might not land. And at this point, the gap between what they think is true and what's actually true has grown wide enough that closing it feels like more of a project than a conversation. So the gap stays, and the relationship stays warm but shallow, and you go home knowing a little bit less of yourself has been shared, and the quiet gets a little bit more complete. There's a version of strength that is actually isolation wearing a good coat. You know this kind. You've been practicing it for years. The kind that says, I don't need to talk about it because I handle my own things. The kind that frames asking for support as weakness and carrying everything alone as a virtue. The kind that shows up for everyone else completely while receiving almost nothing in return and calling that balance. It looks like strength. From a distance, it really does. People see someone who is capable and self-sufficient and composed, someone who doesn't fall apart, someone who can be relied on, someone who is always okay. And you've let them see that, because the alternative, letting them see something other than okay, has never felt safe enough to try.
But here's what that kind of strength actually costs. It costs you the experience of being fully known. And being fully known is one of the most fundamental human needs there is. Not just loved, not just liked, not just appreciated for the version of yourself you present, but known. In the specific, detailed, accurate way that only comes from actually telling someone what's going on, from letting someone into the interior, from saying the thing instead of managing the thing alone in the dark. You have been so busy being the version of yourself that needs nothing that you have almost forgotten what it feels like to need something, and let that be okay. There's a moment that happens sometimes in long friendships, a crack in the composure. Something slips through. Maybe you're tired, or the wine was more than you planned, or the day was hard in a specific way that lowered your defenses, and something real comes out. And you watch your friend receive it. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, what you see on their face is not discomfort, not the awkward scramble to respond correctly, just something quieter and warmer than that. Relief, almost. Like they'd been waiting. Like they'd been talking to the composed version for so long that seeing something else was a gift. And you realize in that moment that the wall you built to protect yourself has also been a wall for them. That the people who love you have been wanting more access and finding the door locked. That the distance you created to stay safe was also, from their side, a distance they couldn't close. They wanted to know you. You just didn't believe it enough to let them try. The things you haven't said are not small. You think of them as small sometimes, as not worth bringing up, as things that would seem like a bigger deal out loud than they actually are. You tell yourself it's not that serious. You don't want to make it into a thing. You're handling it fine. It's not worth the conversation. But they're not small. The worry you've been carrying about money that you haven't mentioned to anyone because you don't want to seem like you can't handle your own life, that's not small. The fear about where you're headed that surfaces at 3 a.m. and that you manage alone every time it shows up, that's not small. The quiet grief of feeling like you should be further along than you are, the specific loneliness of that feeling, the way you compare the inside of your life to the outside of other people's and come away feeling like something is wrong with you. The shame that lives in the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. None of that is small. It's been living in you without anywhere to go, without a conversation that could hold it, without a person who knows enough of the real version to help you carry it. And the reason it's still there, still accumulating, still heavy, is not because you're weak. It's because you stopped giving it anywhere to go. Because telling people things stopped feeling worth it, and you learned to carry it alone instead. The 3 a.m. moments deserve particular attention, because that's when it all comes out, when the performance is over and the day is done, and there's nothing left to do but lie there with the things you've been carrying. That's when the math happens. The calculations you do in your head that you wouldn't say out loud even if someone asked. The running through of scenarios, the best case and the worst case and the most likely case, and none of them feeling quite reassuring enough to let you sleep. That's when the fear gets specific. Not the general ambient anxiety that hums along during the day,
but the particular pointed version that arrives at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning and sits on your chest and says things like, "What if it doesn't get better? And what if you're already behind? And what if this is how it stays?" And nobody knows you're doing this. Not the person asleep next to you, if there is one. Not your friends, not your family. Nobody knows that this is a regular feature of your life, that you have these conversations with yourself in the dark on a regular basis and never tell anyone they're happening. It would change how people see you if they knew. That's what you tell yourself. It would make them worry, or make them think you're struggling more than you are, or change the dynamic in a way you can't fully predict and therefore can't risk. So you do the math alone. And in the morning, you get up and make coffee and show up composed. And nobody knows what the night was like.
There's something that happens when you keep everything inside for long enough. It starts to feel like that's just who you are. Private becomes your identity. Reserved becomes your personality. The going quiet that started as a response to specific experiences starts to feel like a fundamental trait. Like, this is just how I am. I'm not an open person. I don't talk about my feelings. I handle things internally. And those things might be true in some ways, but there's a difference between genuinely preferring privacy and having learned through experience that openness isn't safe. One of those is a personality trait. The other is a wound. And wounds that get called personality traits never heal, because you never try to treat something you think is just how you are. You never question whether the going quiet is serving you if you've decided the going quiet is you. Ask yourself honestly, is the quiet who you actually are, or is the quiet who you became because being open cost you something at some point and you decided the cost was too high? Is the reserved version the real version, or is it the version that survived? There's a difference, and the difference matters. Think about the friendships that fell away. Not the ones that ended in conflict, not the dramatic endings with a clear reason and a clear moment. The ones that just faded, that went quiet over time, where you went from seeing each other all the time to occasionally, to once a year, to a message on a birthday. You've probably told yourself a story about those, that you just drifted, that life got busy, that it's natural for people to grow apart. And some of that is true, but some of those friendships faded because you stopped being real with those people, stopped letting them see what was actually going on. And after a while, there was nothing holding the friendship together except habit and history, and both of those eventually run out. Connection has to be fed, not with time necessarily. Time is easy to give. You can spend hours with someone and never close the gap between you. What feeds connection is honesty, the willingness to say something real, to share something actual, to let another person into the interior of your experience. When you stopped doing that with those people, the friendship stopped being nourished, and it faded, not because they left, because you'd already gone. The financial version of this goes deep, because money is one of the most loaded topics there is. It carries shame, it carries identity, it carries so much of how people see themselves and how they fear others see them, that talking about it honestly, with actual numbers and actual feelings and actual truth, is something almost nobody does. You know your number. You know the one. The number that lives in the back of your mind and comes forward when you're trying to fall asleep, or when someone mentions something expensive, or when you're in a situation where your financial reality and your social presentation are slightly out of alignment. You know that number, and you carry it, and you have never said it out loud to anyone. Because saying it out loud means making it real in a different way. Right now, it exists inside you, private and managed, and yours alone. Saying it means letting someone else see it, and letting someone else see it means absorbing how they react to it, the slight shift in how they look at you, the advice you didn't ask for, the way they might try to relate by sharing their own number, which is different from yours in ways that make the comparison uncomfortable. So you keep it private. You keep the number inside, and you manage the feeling of it alone.
and you become someone who does not talk about money, not the real version of your money, not the actual situation, just the vague, comfortable version that lets people assume you're doing okay without actually lying about it. And nobody knows, and the number keeps living in the back of your mind, in the 3 a.m. moments, in the quiet between things. There's a cost to this that builds slowly, because the number isn't just a number. It's attached to fear, to questions about the future, to the specific anxiety of not being sure if things are going to be okay, to the weight of making decisions alone that feel too big to make alone, to the experience of navigating something complicated and heavy without another person who knows what you're actually navigating. You're not just carrying the financial situation, you're carrying the carrying of it, the isolation of it, the weight of being the only person in your life who knows the real version.
And there's another part of the financial silence that doesn't get named enough: the performance of normalcy. The way you calculate what you can appear to do versus what you can actually afford. The birthday dinners where you smiled and said sure and quietly rearranged the rest of the month to make it work. The plan that got suggested that you quietly didn't join because the cost wasn't possible, and the excuse you gave instead because admitting the real reason felt like exposure. You've done this so many times you don't even register it as effortful anymore. The calculation just happens, automatic, behind the scenes, while your face does something else entirely. And in those moments, there's a particular ache, not just of the financial stress itself, but of the performance, of being in a room full of people who, if they knew, would not think less of you, most of them anyway, and choosing not to tell them, of maintaining a version of yourself that costs energy you don't really have, of being, in some fundamental way, alone in the room, even when you're surrounded. You deserve to put that performance down. You've been holding it up for a long time. Here is what you lose when you stop telling people things. Not just the relief of saying it out loud, not just the practical benefit of getting another perspective or feeling less alone in a hard thing. You lose something more fundamental than that. You lose the experience of being met. Being met is different from being understood. It's different from being agreed with. It's the specific experience of saying something real about yourself and having another person receive it accurately, of speaking and being heard in the way you meant to be heard, of reaching out and finding that the hand you reached for was there. Most people have experienced this at least once, a conversation that felt different from other conversations, a moment where you said something you'd never said before and the response was so exactly right that something in you exhaled, like you'd been holding your breath for a long time and didn't realize until you finally let it go. That experience is what human connection actually is, and you've been living without it for a while. Not because the people in your life are incapable of it, maybe some of them are more capable than you've given them credit for, but because you haven't given them the chance, because you've managed everything internally and presented the composed version and let them think they know you while keeping the actual you somewhere private. You've been so busy being okay that you forgot what it was like to let someone see you when you weren't. And the paradox is that the okay version, the capable, composed, managed version, is actually harder to connect with than the real version, because the real version is specific. The real version has texture. The real version is something another person can actually reach. The okay version is smooth, nothing to hold on to, nothing to meet. There's a particular loneliness in romantic relationships where this is happening, because a romantic relationship is supposed to be the place where you are most known, the closest relationship, the one with the most access, and when you're maintaining the performance inside that relationship too, when even the person who sleeps next to you doesn't know the real version, that loneliness has a particular flavor. It's not the loneliness of being without someone, it's the loneliness of being with someone and still alone. Your partner, if you have one, knows a version of you, loves a version of you, has built a life around a version of you.
But if you've been keeping things private, if you've been performing okay when you weren't, if the financial anxiety and the 3 a.m. math and the fear about the future have been yours alone while they were right there, then what they love is not quite the whole thing. And part of you knows that. And part of you is terrified that if they knew the whole thing, something would change. But here is what is actually true. The version of you they love is not less real because it's incomplete, but it is less known. And the relationship, for all its warmth and history and genuine love, is built on an incomplete picture. Which means there is a version of this relationship that is deeper than what you have. A version where you are actually seen. And you have been choosing, without knowing you were choosing, not to find out if that version is possible. Think about the people you feel closest to, not the people you spend the most time with, not the people who've been in your life the longest, the people you feel actually close to, the ones where the closeness is real, where there's a depth to it that isn't there with everyone else. What made that closeness?
Almost certainly, it was a moment of something real. A conversation that went somewhere neither of you planned. A thing that got said that was more honest than usual. A moment where one of you was not okay and didn't hide it, and the other person stayed, and it mattered. The closeness came from someone saying something real. Which means closeness is not possible without that. Which means the version of connection you have right now, the version where you show up but keep the real version private, that version has a ceiling. It can go so far and no further. It can be warm but not deep. It can be comfortable but not true. And somewhere underneath the comfort of keeping everything private, you know that. You know you've built a life that is warm and populated and fine, but doesn't have the thing you actually need. Here's what nobody tells you about going quiet. It doesn't protect you from pain. It feels like it does. It feels like if you don't put the real thing out there, then nobody can drop it. Nobody can fail to meet you. Nobody can give you the wrong response or make it about them, or make you feel more alone for having tried. If you never try, then you never get it wrong. But the pain doesn't go away because you stopped sharing it. It just changes shape. Instead of the sharp, specific pain of saying something real and not being met, you get the long, slow pain of being in rooms full of people who don't actually know you. The dull, persistent ache of performing okay when you aren't. The quiet loneliness of being surrounded by versions of relationships that have a ceiling, that can only go so deep because you won't let them go deeper. That pain is less visible. Nobody sees it. You barely see it yourself. It just lives in you, low level, constant. The background noise of a life that is full enough on the outside, but something specific and important is missing. The protection wasn't protection. It was just a different kind of hurt. A quieter one, a less risky one, a one you could manage alone without anyone knowing it was there, but still hurt. And the thing about quiet hurt is that it doesn't stay quiet forever. At some point, it starts leaking. Not in ways that are obvious, not in ways you'd name as pain, but in a short temper about something unrelated, in a flatness that descends over a weekend for no clear reason, in the way you pick up your phone when you're alone and scroll for an hour looking for something that isn't there, in the way you feel vaguely cheated by your own life and can't explain why, because on paper it looks fine. That flatness, that low-grade cheated feeling, that's the quiet hurt having gotten somewhere after all. It didn't make it into a conversation, it made it into your nervous system instead. And that's a harder place to clear it from. You already know this. You felt it. The inexplicable down day that follows a month of carrying something alone. The way certain conversations leave you more tired than they should, because you spent the whole time managing what not to say rather than actually being present. The particular exhaustion of a life that looks fine, but is using all its energy to maintain the appearance of fine. You know that exhaustion. You're probably in it right now. You carry your financial anxiety like a secret.
And secrets are heavy in a very specific way, not just because of the content of them, but because of the maintenance. You have to keep them. You have to actively manage the gap between what people think is true about you and what is actually true. You have to navigate conversations that get close to the real thing and steer them away without anyone noticing the steering. That maintenance is exhausting, and it's constant. Every time someone mentions something money-related, you do a small calculation. How much can I say here? What level of truth is safe? How do I engage with this topic without revealing anything I'm not ready to reveal? It happens fast, so fast you barely notice it anymore. But it's happening, every time. And the energy it takes to maintain that gap across every conversation, across every relationship, across every situation where the real version of your financial life is slightly different from the version you're presenting, that energy adds up. It costs more than you realize. It takes something from you that you could be putting somewhere else. Imagine not having to do that. Not necessarily telling everyone everything, not turning every conversation into a financial disclosure, just not having to hide. Just having at least one person who knows the real version, who you can say the actual number to without performing, who knows what you're actually navigating so you don't have to manage the gap with them. Just one person who knows. That's not a lot to want, and it's completely available. It just requires doing the thing you've stopped doing.
Consider for a moment what it would actually feel like to say it. Not out loud to anyone, just here, in your own mind. To imagine the words forming and coming out. I'm really struggling with money right now. Or, I'm scared about the future in a way I haven't been able to tell anyone. Or whatever the specific version is for you, whatever the sentence would be that is closer to the truth than anything you've actually said recently. What does it feel like to imagine saying that? For most people, there's a physical response to even imagining it, something in the chest or the throat or the stomach, a tightening, a kind of preemptive bracing, as if the body knows what's coming and wants to protect itself. That response is real, and it's information. It's telling you how long you've been holding this, how much pressure has built up behind it, how much energy is going into keeping it in. And underneath that tightening, if you wait long enough, there is often something else. Relief, potential relief, the felt sense of what it might feel like to put it down. Even imagining saying it, you can feel the shadow of what it would mean to no longer be the only one carrying it. That shadow is what you've been missing. That's what you've been going without. The thing about silence is it compounds. The longer you go without saying the real thing, the harder it gets to say it. Not because it gets more complicated, because the distance grows between the version of yourself you've been presenting and the version that's actually there. The longer that gap has been managed, the more work it feels like to close it. So the silence gets easier to maintain, and the sharing gets harder to imagine. You've probably had moments where you almost said something, where you were in a conversation and something opened up and you could feel the real thing right there, right on the edge of the words, ready to come out. And you made a decision, not always consciously, to pull back, to say the slightly less true version, to let the moment close without saying the thing that was there. And then later, alone, you thought about what you didn't say. You've done this more times than you remember. Each time it gets a little more natural to pull back. Each time the real thing stays inside a little more comfortably. Each time the version of yourself that tells people things feels a little further away. Until one day you realize you haven't said anything real to anyone in longer than you want to admit. And the silence has become so complete that you're not even sure you know how to break it. Not sure you remember how to start. Not sure there's still a person in you who knows how to say the actual thing instead of the managed version. But there is. That person didn't go anywhere. The going quiet was a response to something, a learned behavior, a pattern that made sense at the time and kept you safe in the specific way you needed to be safe. But it's not who you are. It's not permanent. It's not the final version. And the fact that you're here, listening to this, sitting with this,
Feeling whatever you're feeling right now as the words reach the things you haven't said, that's evidence. Evidence that the real version is still in there, still waiting to be spoken, still carrying all the things that haven't found their way into a conversation yet. The path back is not as far as it feels from here. You have been quiet for what feels like a long time. The gap between the presented version and the real version has grown wide enough that crossing it feels like a project, like you'd have to explain everything, like you'd have to start from the beginning and walk someone through all the things you didn't say, and find a way to account for the years of managed performance and figure out where to even begin. It doesn't work like that. You don't have to explain the whole archive. You just have to say the next true thing. The next true thing is whatever is closest to the surface, whatever has been most present this week, this month, this season of your life. The worry you've been running on quietly, the fear you've been waking up with, the financial pressure that has been reshaping your choices without anyone around you knowing it's doing that. You don't have to go all the way back. You just have to start from here, from whatever is true right now. And the person you say it to doesn't have to be the perfect person. It doesn't have to be the one relationship that has the most history or the most potential or the most capacity to hold everything. It just has to be someone, one person, one true sentence. That's the beginning of the path back.
There's also a version of this where you need more than one conversation, where what you've been carrying is layered enough that it won't fit into a single moment of honesty, where the financial anxiety and the fear about the future and the loneliness of having managed everything alone for this long, where all of that needs more than what any one relationship can hold. And that's okay to acknowledge. Some of what you've been carrying has been building for long enough that it might need a different kind of space, not just a conversation with a friend, maybe something more deliberate, someone trained to receive exactly the weight you're describing, a therapist, a financial counselor, a professional whose entire job is to sit with the real version of what you're experiencing and not flinch. There's a resistance to this too. The idea that needing that kind of support means something about how well you're coping. But you've been coping. You've been coping extraordinarily well for a long time. That's not in question. What's in question is whether coping alone is the only option. And it isn't. The version of you that has been managing everything privately and carrying it all without help is not the model of strength you think it is. It's the model of someone who hasn't yet been shown that there are other ways. There are other ways. People who can hold the financial fear and the future uncertainty and the 3 a.m. math without making it worse, without judging, without flinching, whose job it is to help you find the path through. You don't have to keep managing this alone. That option exists, and choosing it is not a failure. It's the opposite. Starting to tell people things again doesn't look like what you think it looks like. It's not a dramatic revelation, not a sit-down conversation where you lay everything out and finally let someone see the whole interior, not one big moment of radical honesty that changes everything. It's smaller than that. It's a moment in a regular conversation where something real is right there, and instead of pulling back, you let it out. Just a little, just a sentence, just one true thing instead of the managed version, and you see what happens. Maybe nothing extraordinary happens. Maybe the person responds normally and the conversation continues, and it doesn't feel like a revelation. But something small shifted. The gap closed a little. The version of yourself that tells people things showed up for a moment, and you survived it. And maybe you try again the next time. And slowly, in the same way the going quiet happened, gradually, in layers, one moment at a time, the coming back to voice happens too. Not all at once, not to everyone, just one true thing, one moment of not pulling back, one sentence that says something real. That's how it starts. And when you do say the thing, when you let the sentence out that is closer to true than what you usually say, pay attention to what happens in your body. Not just what the other person does, but what happens in you. Because often, even before their response, there is a shift. Something releases. Something that was braced begins to soften. A small amount of the weight you've been carrying moves from inside you to somewhere between you and the other person. You've shared the load, even by a little, even with one sentence. That's what you've been cut off from. That's what you've been going without. And the other person, pay attention to them too. Not for signs of the wrong response, not to read whether they got it, whether they were comfortable, whether their face showed the right thing, but for the simple fact of them being there, of someone knowing, of the interior thing having made it out into the world and someone else being aware of it. That awareness, the fact of it, it changes the weight. Not always as much as you need, sometimes not enough, but always something. And something, after a long time of nothing, is not a small thing. You deserve to be known, not the version of you that shows up composed and capable and fine, the full version, the one that has fears and questions and a financial situation that is more complicated than you let on, and a 3 a.m. brain that does math nobody knows about, and a whole interior life that is vivid and specific and real, even though nobody has seen it in a long time. That version deserves to be known, not by everyone, not in every conversation, but by someone, in at least one relationship in your life, by at least one person who has been given access to the actual you rather than the presentation of you. You've spent so long keeping the real version private that it feels like the real version isn't fit for sharing, like it's too messy or too heavy or too much to ask someone to receive, like the composed version is the only one worth presenting. But the composed version is not what connection is made from. Connection is made from the real version, the messy, specific, complicated real version, the one you've been keeping to yourself.
The money piece is part of the real version. The fear is part of the real version. The worry about where you're headed, the questions you don't have answers to, the nights where you ran the numbers and they didn't work out the way you needed them to, the feeling of being behind that lives in you and that you've never said out loud to another person. All of that is part of the real version, and it deserves to go somewhere other than inside you. You don't have to share it with everyone. You don't have to make your financial anxiety everyone's problem. But somewhere in your life, there should be at least one person who knows, who has been trusted with the real version, who can sit with you in the actual thing instead of the version of the thing you let everyone see. That person might already exist in your life, and you've just never told them anything real enough to let them be that for you. There's something you've been waiting for, maybe without knowing it. Permission, or the right moment, or the right person to say the right thing in the right way that would make it feel safe enough to finally say the true thing back. And you've been waiting a long time, and it hasn't happened quite the way you needed it to. But waiting for the right conditions is itself a kind of silence, because the conditions are never quite right. There's always a reason why this conversation isn't the moment, and this relationship isn't quite ready, and this week isn't the best time to get into it. There will always be a reason to wait, and the waiting is what keeps the silence going. The permission you're looking for is not coming from outside. It's here, in this moment, in the fact that you've sat with this long enough to feel something, in the thing that's been sitting in your chest while you've been listening, in the awareness, quiet and persistent, that something needs to change. That's the permission. Not a perfect moment, not ideal conditions, just a willingness to say the next true thing. Going quiet was a way of protecting yourself, and it worked in the specific limited way it was designed to work. It kept you safe from certain kinds of hurt. It kept the real version private and therefore undroppable. It prevented the specific pain of saying the thing and not being met, but it created a different kind of pain. And that pain has been running quietly in the background for a long time. The loneliness of the full room, the ache of being surrounded by people who think they know you, the exhaustion of maintaining the gap, the weight of carrying everything alone. That pain is telling you something. It's telling you that the going quiet has cost more than it protected, that the risk of saying the real thing is smaller than the cost of never saying it,
that somewhere in you there are things that have been waiting a long time to find their way into a conversation. And maybe the next time someone asks how you're doing, you don't say fine. You say something true instead. Just one thing. Just the beginning. Because the beginning is all it takes. Everything else comes after that. And you've been waiting long enough.